Hello, today I'm going to do a video on the SED Stream Editor. It's the stream in first. Basically, the input flows through the program and is directed to the standard output. So typically, the input comes from some files, goes through some commands, then it goes to the standard output. SED is normally used for things like editing more than one file simultaneously, writing conversion programs. If you've got a particularly common editing task to do that has some sort of commonality about it, and you want to do it for a lot of files, then it could be possible to program it using SED. There's two ways you can run it from the command line. Excuse me. You can basically, if you want to issue the actual commands on the command line itself, you use this version. The files come in, they go through the commands. There's some options here, and then they're processed to the screen, standard output. Yeah. If you want to put a lot of commands together, then they go in a script file. They go into the files. You can do more than one command if you want to. Okay. Then again, it goes to the options. And again, this -F you're going to need if you want to run the if you want to use a script file rather than a command on the command line like this example here. So the first thing to do is to understand the basic syntax for a command in its most general sort of form, which is always a little bit fiddly to understand. It's basically this, and the only thing you really need, everything is optional along here, apart from the command. All right, here. So these command that goes in there is of this form. Address, the address that you have here, that can be basically, you can have, there's none of them, you don't have to have any of them, because again square brackets in first optional, so you don't have to have any. Or you can have one, or you can have two, okay? And I'll talk about how to do that in just a moment. So again, this is all optional. I mean, one very straightforward way you could do this, think of this just to get yourself thinking about it to begin with. You could have 1, 2, and that would act on lines 1 and 2 from the file, and these commands act in a line-by-line way. I should say that as well. The first line goes in, the command acts upon it, and then that's output. And the second line goes in, the command acts upon it, and then that's output. This not here means you either apply it to the lines at this address or the lines not at this address. So if you put the quotation mark in there or the shriek mark in there, then that's how that's going to work. Okay, it either acts on the lines at those address or the line commands. Sorry, the input files, not the commands, not at that address. It then actually does the command, and then you can specify arguments to that command if you want to. Okay, depending on the command will depend upon what those arguments are. And I think the most simple way to understand it to begin with is just with the P command. I think that makes things very simple, and you can understand how addresses work then pretty much. And then I don't think there's any arguments as far as I know to the P command. There might be. But it certainly, you can very easily understand how the addresses works, the command works, and then I'll show you a command with some arguments. And by far the most common command is the S command, which is a substitute command. And if you've seen some SED before, it's very likely to be that. Okay, so let's just start with that. Now I've set up some files in this directory. Just ls, just to show you the file I'm going to be working with most, it'll be this foo file, and you can see that's basically the contents of foo. So let's see how the P command works. So sed P, that's the command, gone in there, and then I want to put the file here. So you see I've done sed, command, file, and literally it takes in the first line, it prints out the second line, takes in the second line, prints out the second line, takes in the third line, prints out the second line, third line, sorry, and so forth, and that's how it goes through that. So let's just use so we want to understand the address arguments now. So that's what goes before the command, and the most simple way you can do it is 1, 2. And what happens? It reads in the first line, it prints out the first line, reads the second line, prints out the second line. Doesn't do anything with the third line, so that's giving you an indication of what's happening there. It's basically doing the print command on the first and the second line, but not the third. So let's say we want to use the exclamation mark. Now, as soon as you start using special characters like that, you can have to put it in quotes. So I'll just show you that's going to give you an error. Okay, it's not going to work as you expect. What you want to do, okay, is to make sure that to make sure the expression is expanded correctly at the prompt. You just put quotes around it if you're ever going to use special characters. So now, okay, what does it do? Well, it doesn't do lines 1 and 2, but it does do line 3. So line 1 left it as it is, line 2 left it is, line 3 repeated. So there you go. That's a sort of how you use addresses, how you use the not command. There are other options for the address that you can use. You can use, for example, there aren't many options. So that's going to be the last line if you do that one. So So that's basically this. You can do line numbers like I've done, you can do the last line, or you can do this final thing that I'm going to do now, which is basically, if you want to, let's say I want to do this, I want to do lines that begin with 1. Ooh, doesn't like that. Okay. And terminate. Oh yeah, it's because I need to. Now if you're getting one thing you have to do with this, you have to just put the final quote in. Thank you, still doesn't work. Character missing command. Okay, clearly I've put the address in, but I haven't put the command in, so it wants to be P there. And that wants, wants to go there, I think, and that should finally work. So there you go. So it's executing on every line that starts with 1. Okay, so that's a different way of specifying an address. That's still the command, and there we go. Every line that starts with 1, we're echoing there. We're putting it back again, right? That's the way you can do it. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's covered most of the mostly how to understand the address. We'll look next at understanding some of the options. So if we go back to our main file here, or the little description I gave you at the start, you can see you can use a -e option, and that's if you want to do multiple commands. Of course, there's a couple of ways you could do that. I mean, if you do 2, then still maybe you could use a command line. If you're going to do 5 or 6, and maybe you want to start using a script file, but I'll show you both. Okay, so let's say I'm going to have to show you this in conjunction with another command, which is, as I say, by far the most common, which is the substitute command. So let's look at our foo file one more time, and let's say now I want to replace every uppercase one with a, lowercase one that I've got there, that O-N-E, with an uppercase one. Then I can do SED. I'll just do the basic command, and that's basically, there's a couple of things to point out here as well. This isn't, the way I've specified this one looks very similar to what I did before, but this is actually an argument to the S command. So this one that's going in here is part of this arguments. There is no address specified here. And what happens when you don't specify any address is it just takes every single line in the file. You need to complete it, otherwise it won't work. And it's going to replace every single one with an uppercase one. Okay, so I think it's reasonably clear how that argument to the substitute command works. So you substitute every lowercase one with an uppercase one there. So foo, in we go, and you see, okay, there it goes. Now one thing to notice is it doesn't do the second one. It by default only does the first one it finds. So it's done with the first string it finds here. It's okay, so that's that. That's good. So let's say I want to do two commands. You can't simply do this. You can't simply do S. So let's say I'm going to replace the 2 with an uppercase 2 now. You can't just do that. It's going to have a problem. It thinks his second one is a file, right? So because you can use more than one file, so I could have put a second file here. Let's say I wanted to do 2 or 3 files. You can use as many files as you want. What it's thinking at the moment is that that's a file. So we want to stop it thinking that. Just put a -e in front of each command. So -e there, a -e there, and then hit return, and hopefully that will now work. Ooh, doesn't like it. S command. I think you might need quotes now, maybe. Oh no, it's Gus again. Okay, you need to make sure you finish that off, and there you go. You can see that the ones are substituted, the 2's are substituted again, just the first occurrences. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And that's worked fine. Okay, so we see how we use the E command to do basically 2 lines of input. So look, you can use a script file to do a similar sort of thing, and if I just do an ls in my directory, I can't remember exactly what I called it, and let's cat that SED script. Okay, so if I use this SED script, that's the pattern. These are the commands. Because I want to do more than one command, I'm using curly brackets, and you do have to make sure that it follows a certain syntax. So it's going to be pattern, first curly bracket, and the first curly bracket ends a line. Each command on a new line, and finally end with a curly bracket on a separate line. According to the book, what's it called? Unix in a Nutshell book, it has to be that way, and I've not done it differently to try and test it, but this certainly works. So let's try and run that command now. So I'm going to do sed -f sed script foo, and hopefully that will work. Couldn't open SED script message. Oh, I typed it incorrectly or something. Yep. Okay, SED script, there we go. And now that's done exactly the same thing, but it's done it with it's not done quite the same thing, and that's because of the P option I've put there, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So basically it's printed these ones, okay, so actually I won't talk about it now, I'll talk about it now. So it's replaced the 1 with the 1, and it's also replaced the 2 with the 2 there, so that line's been printed. This line here, the second line, it's replaced the 1 and the 2, so again, because of the 2, it gets printed. The last line it's not been told to do, so it does nothing, okay? So that's how the P works there, alright? I think the main reason I put that in is because one of the things I'm going to show you next, which is we've done the -E, we've done the -F. What happens if I put a -N in? So let's say I'm going to edit that script file first of all, so I'm just going to change that a little bit. So gedit SED script, and let's take that out. And let's go up. Okay, and now you see it's basically it's done the same thing, but it hasn't done the print now, so I've taken that print off. And that's just to set this next thing up really. So if I'm going to do -N with that, it basically just stops all the output. And the only way to show the output again is to use the P command. So if I now go back to SED script and I put a P in here, save, okay, let's go back. Boom. Yeah, so now you see the just what you wanted printed. It doesn't echo every single line like it just does where you specify print. So it's just done it for basically every line where it's replaced a 1 there. You see it's or is it a 2? Let's have a look. Every line where I've replaced a 2, just a 2. So the last line, because it replaces just a 1, that's not occurred. So you can see how you can use a sort of -N and P in tandem there. Let's say you just want to, these could be different commands, couldn't they? Let's say you just want to print one of the commands rather than both. If I put a P there, you can imagine what's going to happen. Alright, then you do that where you can just specify what you want and it stops all the output coming out. You can imagine this is a really big file, there'll be a lot of output, so this sort of allows you to sort of reduce that a little bit. Okay, so that's most of the sort of standard command line options. If we just go back here and we'll have a look how far we've got. So we've covered all these options. We've covered the command, how we basically do that. You should be pretty clear on how the address works, how the not statement works, the command, and as I say, because you've actually done the arguments as well, really, or we've done the arguments because of that, the S substitute command. And it's a good one to learn because it's basically the most common, according to some, it's probably, if you've ever seen some SED before, you've probably seen it done on one, in this kind of substitute way. It doesn't have to be. I mean, we saw it with P before, and there's other commands as well. But it is about the most common way. I remember when I used to use SED at work, it basically I was just using substitution for the most part. And there's a very good website that I've found. This one here, okay, a very useful website. If you Google it, it's about the first one you'll see as well. It goes through, for the most part, and you just say here, 90% of what you learn with SED will be the substitution part, substitution command, how that works. So it's a good place to start. Okay, and it does a lot more as well. So I'm just going to do, this website's probably, if you want to go further with SED now, the best thing to do is to check out this website. I'm going to do 1 or 2 more commands that I found particularly useful with the substitution process we've just looked at. But if you want a sort of more full, thorough understanding of that, I suggest you come to this website and have a look there. Alright, so the most simple one, and we've seen this a few times now, so if I just scroll up to, type it in again in a moment. Yeah, okay, so one very basic example there. Let's just look at that again. What does it do? All you see when you do that is that the first one gets replaced. Let's say you don't want to do that, say you want all of them to be replaced. What do you do? Well, you just specify G here for greedy, I believe. Okay, so it replaces all of the ones now. So if you do that, all the ones get replaced. Okay, not just the first one, all of them. What about if we want to replace the second, or the third, or the fourth, or whatever? Well, then you can use a \2, and that will replace just the second one there. You see the first one's been left as is, the second one has been replaced. Okay, so those are 2 very useful options for that. The other thing is escape characters, and how do I mean, for example, we've just replaced 1. What about if you have some sort of special characters in there as well? So I've created another little file for that. If we just show you this. So let's say my job, I want to go through this entire file, and I don't want all this backslash names. I want to get rid of all of that. It's the same every single line. Okay, so I don't want to use it. Let's see if I can get rid of that. SED. Well, you're going to have to basically use escape characters. So I should know that before you even start going anywhere near, when you're using special characters, you always want to put that there. I want to escape the names. Let's say I just want to remove them. So here I'm going to leave it blank. Okay, and I want to do that on directory. Okay, off it goes. Now, with all those backslashes, it's a little bit difficult to understand it like that. So there's a kind of a nicer way you can understand it. Instead of these forward slashes that we've got here, you want to keep that one. You can use quotes. So you still have to escape this, of course. So you have to have that forward slash there because it's part of the name that I'm trying to replace. But to save the confusion of having sort of forward slash there, it looks a bit of a mess. And if you go to the website I was just showing you about, this one really good example where it shows you how that can look very confusing. It's much easier just to use colons instead of forward slashes in some situations. So there we go. Alright, so I think that's quite a lot of SED covered. Certainly you've covered the sort of basic idea of the command. You should know how to use it. And as I say, if you want to go further, particularly with this substitution notion, this is a good website to look at. Okay, thank you very much for listening.